The tank cruiser Mki was a British cruiser tank of the interwar period. It was the first cruiser tank, a fast tank designed to bypass the main enemy lines and engage the enemy's lines of communication, along with enemy tanks. The cruiser Mk2 was a more heavily armoured adaptation of the Mark I, developed at much the same time. Design and development. In 1936, the British War Office designated two different kinds of tanks for future development: heavily armoured infantry tanks to be used in close cooperation with infantry during attacks, and fast mobile cruiser tanks designed to make forays deep into enemy territory. In 1934, Sir John Carden of Vickers Armstrong was asked to provide a reasonably cheap tank as a replacement for some of the medium models then in use. The pilot model of his design was finished in 1936 and given the designation A9E1. It incorporated the best features of the earlier Mk3 light tank, and was powered by a commercial petrol engine. However, this was still in the time of the Great Depression, and the tank had a number of cost-cutting measures applied. It was the first British tank to have a centrally located turret and to have power traverse. The system was by Nash and Amp Thompson and similar to that being introduced on the Vickers Wellington bomber aircraft. The armour was light, with a maximum of 14 mm thickness. Many armour faces were vertical, and there were numerous shot traps, but it could achieve 25 mph and carried the new high-velocity QF 2-pounder gun. The driver's compartment and the fighting compartments were not separated, as well as the turret armament, which consisted of an ordnance QF 2-pounder gun and a coaxial Vickers machine gun. There were two small turrets either side of the driver's compartment, each with a Vickers machine gun. Both these smaller turrets were permanently manned, which gave the tank a total crew of 6. The A9E1 was tested against other designs and, although lacking in some areas, it was accepted in 1937 as an interim design until a Christie suspension cruiser tank could be delivered. An order was placed for 125. 75 were built by Harland and Wolff, and the other 50 were built by Vickers. Originally, a Rolls-Royce car engine was used, but this proved underpowered and was replaced by an AEC bus engine. The later Valentine infantry tank essentially used the same low hull and suspension, though with considerably more armor. The A9 weighed 12 long tons, was 19 feet long, 8.7 feet high, 8.2 feet wide, and had a top speed of 25 mph on road and 15 mph off. Its maximum road range was 150 miles. The ammunition load was 102-pounder rounds and 3,000 rounds from the 3 Vickers machine guns. Service. The Mark I cruiser began to be delivered in January 1939. The cruiser was an effective tank in the French, Greek and early North African campaigns. The 2PDR gun was lethal against the early Italian tanks encountered during the North African campaign and could hold its own against Rommel's early Panzer IIs and IIs. The A9's 2-pounder gun could also breach the 20 to 30 mm of protective steel on later opponents, such as the Panzer IID and the Panzer IVD variants. It was effective until the Germans introduced the more thickly armoured Panzer I variant to the desert in the spring of 1941. However, its minimal armor made the A9 very vulnerable to most Axis anti-tank weapons. Also problematic was the lack of high-explosive shells for the 2PDR gun, and even worse the lack of armor-piercing shells for the 94mm gun on the close support version. Another issue was that the areas around the front machine gun turrets created a frontal surface that was more vulnerable to enemy fire than it would have been had it been a flat plate, let alone a sloped glacis. The mechanical unreliability of the Kreuz was also a disadvantage. In particular, tracks were easily slewed, causing difficulties. Variants. Mark I, used by the 1st Armoured Division in the Battle of France. Used by the 2nd and 7th Armoured Divisions in North Africa until 1941. Mark I CS had a 3.7-inch L-15 breech-loaded howitzer, derived from the World War I QF3.7-INCH mountain howitzer, instead of the 2-pounder gun. 40 rounds, mostly smoked, were carried.